Shalom, it's Joshua. I'm here with a lesson, and the lesson is entitled, The Law is a Parable. And I pray that the lesson is edifying. And I just pray, Father, that your Ruach HaKodesh, Father, would lead and guide this lesson. You would guide us into all truth of Yahushua, who is the way, the truth, and the light, Father, and that through him we are able to see you. Now, again, this lesson is called The Law is a Parable. Now, Elohim, speaking to his people, says, "Listen, O my people, to my law." And further on, saying, "I will open my mouth in a parable." Here, he is telling his people the law that he is given by the word of his mouth is a parable. Yahushua, the son of Elohim, said, "I do nothing of myself, but as my Father has taught me, I speak these things." So he's saying that his teachings were given to him by his Father. And Scripture says, without a parable, he did not teach. So in this we see Elohim the Father taught the law in parables, and his Son, who had the teachings of his Father, taught the law in parables as well. Now, a parable is a natural story with a spiritual meaning. So, knowing the law is a parable, we understand that beyond its natural meaning, there is a spiritual meaning within. When we understand that spiritual meaning, we truly understand the law. King David knew beyond the natural understanding, there is a deeper spiritual understanding of the law. And he cried out for the understanding of that law in the Psalms, saying, "Open my eyes that I might see the wondrous things of thy law." Now, his natural eyes were open. King David could see. He was not blind. So he was asking Elohim to open his spiritual eyes so he could see the spiritual wonders of the law. Later he says, "Sacrifices and offerings thou did not desire. My ears hast thou opened. Burnt offerings and sin offerings thou hast not required." However, anyone through their natural ear hearing Leviticus will tell you that sacrifices, offerings, burnt offerings, and sin offerings are exactly what is required in the law. But Elohim opened King David's spiritual ears, and he heard the spiritual requirement of the spiritual law. When he attained that understanding, he understood the parable and truly understood the law. There were few who understood the parable, the meaning of the spiritual law within the natural law. You see in Psalms, offer to God the sacrifices of praise. Now, they use the flesh of bulls for offering in the natural law. But if your flesh is holding you back from praising, your flesh is the bull you need to sacrifice according to the spiritual law. This is the spiritual understanding in the natural law. This is the parable spoken through the word of Elohim. And again, in Hosea, we see another parable understanding of the law revealed, as we see the spiritual understanding within the natural revealed, where it reads, "Take away all iniquity and receive us graciously. So will we render the calves of our lips." Calves were used for sacrifice in the natural law. So it's being said, take away the sin, and they will offer up a sacrifice of praise through the offering of their lips, giving praise. Now we're going to go over another parable understanding of the spiritual law within the natural law, and that's going to be found in the book of Jonah. But before we go there, we're going to go to the actual law that it's going to go into. And that law is in the book of Leviticus, where it reads, "And when you will offer a sacrifice of thanksgiving unto the Lord, offer it at your own free will." A free will offering was given out of your own free will. It wasn't out of the obligation of sin or the obligation of guilt. It was just out of your thankfulness to the Most High. And they would offer up oxen and goats. Now, in the book of Jonah, it reads, "I, with a voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you." So in the natural law, your sacrifice of thanksgiving comes through bulls and goats. But in the spiritual law, your sacrifice of thanksgiving comes forth by the voice of thanksgiving within you, not out of fear of judgment, nor out of expectation of breakthrough, but from your own free will, thanking the Most High for everything that He is and everything that He will be in your life. This is the spiritual understanding of the natural when it comes to the parable of the Most High's law. So we see Elohim, the Father, gave the law in a parable, putting within the natural law a spiritual meaning. Yahushua came teaching the law of the Father in parables, natural teachings which held spiritual understanding of the law. And throughout Scripture, we see kings and prophets desiring to have these parables of the law revealed unto them. Yahushua, revealing them only to his disciples, informed them, "Many prophets and kings wanted to see what you see, but did not see it, and hear what you hear, but did not hear it." They did not see it spiritually, and they did not hear it spiritually, as Yahushua taught the law to his disciples. The nation was not able to see the law spiritually or hear the law spiritually when Yahushua would teach to them. It had been like that since the times of old. Moshe himself, when speaking to the people after they had received the law in Mount Sinai, told them, "Yet the Lord hath not given you a heart to perceive, eyes to see, or ears to hear unto this day." Meaning, although they had received the law, they had only received it naturally, and spiritually they had not seen the true understanding of the law, nor had they spiritually heard the true understanding of the law, because they could not understand the parable. And there was nothing new under the sun, because the same thing happened when Yahushua came teaching the law in a parable. They could not see it spiritually, they could not hear it spiritually, which is why Yahushua says in Matthew, "I speak to them in parables, because seeing they see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, which saith, By hearing ye shall hear, and not understand, and seeing you shall see, and not perceive." Because although they heard it, they didn't understand it spiritually. And although they saw it, they did not perceive it spiritually. And in that, they didn't receive the true understanding of the law, because Scripture says the law is spirit and life. When Moses said, I set before you life and death, choose life, he was saying, I set before you the spiritual understanding of the law and the natural understanding of the law. The natural understanding of the law is after the flesh, and Scripture says the flesh profits nothing. But the spiritual understanding, Scripture says the Spirit gives life. So those were the options that were presented before Israel, but they chose to receive the natural understanding instead of the spiritual. And today, if we follow after that same custom, we will fall just as they fell. God is spirit, his word is spirit, and the law that he gave us is spiritual. And Scripture says that we have to listen, observe, and obey the law. So this means we need to listen to it spiritually, observe it spiritually, and obey it spiritually. So I pray this gives you a better perspective on the law, and that it would change your mindset in approaching the law, and that you would understand that transgression of the law is not just us transgressing it naturally in the body, but it's also us transgressing it in our spirit. So the more we understand it spiritually, the more our spirit will not transgress the law, and the more our spirit will be purified. So again, I pray this changes the way you approach the law, the way you try to understand the law, and the Most High willing, he reveals his law to you on a deeper level, and you go beyond the natural into the spiritual. Shalom.